Hello, and welcome to another episode of Jayme's Journal, where you'll hear about my journey to becoming a traditionally published author and book reviews on some of my very favorite series. I'm Jayme, and today we're talking about Rachel Caine, who is actually the author who kind of got me started in urban fantasy. She has at least 8 series that I'm aware of, including Weather Warden, Red Letter Days, Athena Force, Outcast, Revivalist, the Great Library series, and the Morganville Vampire series, which we'll be talking about today. Though I do recommend the Great Library series, that was one of the other series by her that I read. I don't know that I would necessarily classify it as urban fantasy, but it definitely has the paranormal type elements to it, and it's got a really great plot line of the library hoarding all this information and not wanting anybody else to be able to have access to that. So I do recommend reading that series, and it's, I believe, 5 books long. So it's not on the longer side, but it definitely does give you that feeling of really getting to know the characters, really getting involved in the characters, and being able to follow them over the course of time where you feel satisfied with the ending. So the Morganville Vampire series that we're talking about today is actually a 15-book series, starting with Glass Houses and ending with Daylighters. Fun fact, my husband and I actually interviewed Rachel Caine on our morning show when Daylighters was being released. And she is such a sweetheart. She is so down to earth. And I knew it was going to be the last book that she was releasing for that series. So I was really, really excited to be able to celebrate the release of that book, the launch, and get her perspective on what was going on with that series. So she is so much fun, and this whole series is really one of those that is going to immerse you for a long time. The series itself follows Claire Danvers, who is a 16-year-old college student at Texas Prairie University. And she is a really intelligent young woman who ends up sort of being taken hostage in a way by the vampires in Morganville. So Morganville, Texas is a small town that's being run by vampires. It was founded by vampires and it is under the control of vampires. So there is a population of humans there, but it's much smaller than the population of vampires. And while the university is there, it's sort of off limits to the vampires. It just so happens that Claire kind of stumbles into this whole other world of the vampires and what's going on sort of politically within this whole ecosystem. So we see Claire at Texas Prairie University. She's actually being bullied by the mayor's daughter, Monica Morell, who is under the protection of a vampire. They have this confrontation that sends Claire running from the university, basically, and answering this ad for a roommate in the town of Morganville. So she answers this ad and she meets up with the 3 people who are already living in this house, who are Shane Collins, who ends up being her love interest. And Shane is sort of a troubled guy. You know, he's pretty much dead set on destroying the vampires in Morganville because he feels like they're responsible for the death of his mom and his sister. So he's on his own and he's living with his best friend, who is Michael Glass. And Michael owns the glass house where this whole thing starts to unfold and takes place in the beginning. And Michael's story is a little bit strange, but really a cool twist on things because he was actually attacked in the glass house. And we find out that the house has sort of supernatural powers associated with it too. So when he was attacked, he was going to die. And the house actually saved him and made him into sort of a ghost-like figure. So he's bound to the house. He can't actually physically leave it until later on in the series when other events take place and he ends up in a different kind of situation. So he's tied to the house and he's the local rock star. He's got the musical ability. You know, he's that guy that every girl wants to be with, and he knows how to play guitar, and he was on that path to being a rock star. The other person that lives in the house is Eve Rosser, and she is the goth girl of the group. She is the one who's been in love with Michael for so many years, and now they're together and they all live in this house. And she was probably one of my favorite characters just because her personality was more spontaneous and a little bit more out there than Claire. Claire is very reserved, and Eve drives a hearse at one point in the whole story because her giant Cadillac gets destroyed, and so she ends up buying a hearse. And I just really related to her in some ways. She actually works at the coffee house with the vampire owner, and she's got attitude, and she stands up for herself and she stands up for her friends. And I really respected that about her. This series has a whole cast of vampires who play huge roles, which is understandable considering that they founded the town. So it follows the four main characters on this journey to sort of freeing the town from these outside forces, because the whole first part is about freeing them from the reason they're actually in the middle of the desert in the first place, which, if you think about it, I mean, vampires in the middle of the desert, yeah, that is kind of weird. There's nothing but sun, and vampires don't do sun. So you actually find out that there's a reason that they were sort of pushed to this place that they're at. And Claire and Michael and Shane and Eve all play this huge role in taking down that outside force. Then you end up having to finish out the series where they're finding a balance between the humans and the vampires, because, you know, it wouldn't really feel like it was a complete series without bringing it all together. I really did enjoy seeing them all grow and become stronger, more independent, really involved characters, you know, those kind who take charge and get in there and get things done. And I did feel like it was a satisfying ending. I know that I say that a lot, but truly, you have those books sometimes that they end and you're like, wait, what? What just happened? Or you see those TV series sometimes that it ends and you're thinking, what did I miss? Because that was not an ending. That was not satisfying in any way, shape, or form. But the series that I read and the series that I'm reviewing, especially in these early episodes, are ones that I really just felt like had that hook. They hooked you from the beginning. They made you want to keep reading. And at the end of the whole thing, you felt like you knew these characters. You related to them, and you felt satisfied with where they ended up in their journey. So again, this was probably my first urban fantasy series that I read, and I was really hooked by the idea of the fantasy world and the real world colliding. There was just something about the idea of the whole fantasy world being hidden right in front of your eyes and not realizing that it's there in front of you. Because a lot of these urban fantasy series, like this one, like Megan Sienna Doige's series that I reviewed last week, like the Twilight series, a lot of these series have that element of humans don't know what's really happening. Unless you're privy to what's going on because of the circumstances, you are totally unaware that this even exists in the space that you're occupying. And I love that idea. I love the idea that we could be walking around right now and have these things taking place in the same space we're living and breathing and not even know it's there. That's why I felt like I really wanted to write something that was very much rooted in that idea, in the idea that here we are in this world, we've got all of these other elements happening, and we just don't know. So in my own writing, I actually use witches and warlocks and demons and devils, and I've got a whole cast of characters living in the space that I occupy every day. Because I feel like it's a great way to relate to the things around me that are happening that maybe I can't explain. And to be able to bring in some fun to the space around me. So there was one other thing that I wanted to touch on. I mentioned last week that Amazon Prime had the Morganville Vampire series as a show of some sort, and I had just found out about it and I wanted to watch it. So I did actually watch that. And it's advertised as a one season type thing with 6 episodes. But when I watched it all the way through. It was close to an hour's worth of content. And when I was finished, I was really disappointed because there was nothing left. There was nothing after that. So I did some digging and I found out that this was actually a Kickstarter thing that people funded and got enough money to do one season. But that season was filmed in very short segments. So they actually did 6 really short episodes that they then took and compacted down into one longer episode. So what you do see on Amazon Prime is the entire series that's been condensed into one actual episode. So I was really disappointed because I felt like it followed closely what the book wanted and it kept with the premise. So I really wish that they would have been able to continue it so that I could see what was going on. I know a lot of people gave it kind of bad reviews because they said that the casting was not great and there was a lot of stuff that got left out. But truly, that's going to happen with most any book that's made into any sort of TV series or a movie because there's just not enough time or space to be able to fit all those great little details that we love so much. And as far as casting, I felt like they did a pretty good job with what they had to work with. Considering this was Kickstarter funded, I felt like it was pretty darn good. And I really was disappointed that there wasn't anything more after that. So that's my review of Rachel Caine's Morganville Vampire series. Overall, I would say that this series would get a 5 out of 5, definitely, because it was the first one that really hooked me and brought me into this urban fantasy idea. I recommend reading it, especially now that we're getting closer to Halloween. You know, the whole theme of vampires and that type of setting is really definitely going to stick with you right now during this time of year. I am not sure what I'm going to be reviewing on next week's review episode, so you'll get to be surprised. I am reading a lot of new content, so whatever it is I decide to review is definitely going to be something newer. I'm not sure yet if it'll be a series or a standalone, but I'm thinking I might want to branch out and do some standalone books. We'll see what happens. If you enjoyed this episode, or if you have any questions or comments and you want to know more about anything that I talked about, you can feel free to reach out to me on all of my platforms, on Facebook and Twitter at Jayme Phelps Author, on Instagram at Jayme Phelps _author, and on my website at authorjaymephelps.com, where you can also hear all of my podcast episodes, and you can also hear those on Spotify, Amazon Prime Music, Stitcher, Buzzsprout, Apple Podcasts, and most anywhere that you can hear a podcast. I look forward to talking to you on the next episode of Jayme's Journal.